I've lived in Grandma's old house for a year now, ever since she passed and left it to me in her will. It's a squat little place on a quiet street, all faded yellow siding and creaky floors, but it's home. The real treasure's out back, 3 giant oak trees, tall as the sky, their branches sprawling like arms that hug the yard. Grandma planted them decades ago, before I was born, when Mom was still a kid, calling them her pillars of strength. She'd sit under them with me when I was little, sipping lemonade, telling stories about how they'd outlast us all. They're more than trees. They're her, rooted deep in this patch of suburbia, whispering her laugh every time the wind rustles their leaves. I'm 25 now, not a kid anymore, but those oaks still feel like family. The neighborhood's fine, mostly. People wave, lawns stay neat, kids bike in lazy circles. Except for Karen. She lives next door, blue shutters, pristine grass, a flamingo statue by her mailbox that looks like it's judging you. She's the HOA's unofficial queen, floral skirts, clipboard always tucked under her arm, eyes that narrow at anything out of line. She'd nagged me about the trees before, claimed they blocked her view of the cul-de-sac or dropped too many leaves on her precious lawn. I'd shrug, say, they're Grandma's, and she'd huff off, scribbling something like it'd scare me. Never thought she'd go this far. It hit me Friday morning, a sound like a buzzsaw chewing through my dreams. I jolted awake, sheets tangled, heart pounding. Chainsaws. Loud, grinding, coming from the backyard. I stumbled to the window, still in boxers and a ratty t-shirt, and froze. 3 guys in orange vests were hacking at the oaks. My oaks, sawdust flying, branches crashing like broken bones. One was already down, a stump staring up like a fresh wound. Another teetered, half its trunk gone, leaves trembling as the blade bit in. The third stood tall but marked, red paint slashed across its bark, next in line. I yelled, "Hey, stop!" But the noise drowned me out, a roar that shook the glass. I bolted outside, barefoot, gravel biting my feet, and there she was, Karen, perched on her porch like a vulture, smirking. She had a coffee mug in one hand, clipboard in the other, watching the massacre like it was her morning show. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, voice cracking as I ran toward the crew. The lead guy, a beefy dude with a beard, killed his saw, squinting at me. "HOA job," he grunted, nodding at Karen. "She hired us, said the trees violate rules." I spun on her, fist clenched. "There's no rule. Those are mine, Grandma's. You can't just—" She cut me off, stepping down, skirts swishing like she owned the world. "They're a nuisance," she said, voice sharp and smug. "Blocking my view, littering my yard. HOA says they go." I stared, chest heaving, as the second oak groaned and fell, crashing hard, shaking the ground. My throat tightened. I could almost hear Grandma gasp. "Show me the rule," I snapped, stepping closer. She waved her clipboard, a fake little laugh bubbling out. "Article 7, Section 3, Obstructions to Aesthetic Harmony. I've got authority." The third tree shuddered, saw revving up again, and I lunged at the crew. "Stop, please. I'll pay you to stop." Beard guy hesitated, but Karen barked, "Finish it. He doesn't run this street." The saw roared, and I watched, helpless, as the last oak buckled, branches snapping, roots ripped bare, a pile of splintered history where Grandma's strength used to stand. It was over in 20 minutes, 3 stumps, a mess of sawdust, the crew packing up like they'd mowed a lawn. Karen sipped her coffee, smug as ever, while I stood there, barefoot in the dirt, staring at the wreckage. The air smelled like cut wood and betrayal, heavy and wrong. "You're a monster," I said, voice low, trembling. She smirked wider, tapping her clipboard. "Just keeping the neighborhood nice. You'll thank me when your property value jumps." She turned, hips swaying back to her porch, leaving me with stumps and silence. The crew hauled off, truck rumbling, and I sank to my knees by the biggest stump, tracing its rings, Grandma's years, gone. I didn't cry, not then. Too mad, too hollow. Those trees weren't just wood. They were her hands in the soil, her voice in the shade, her promise I'd never be alone. Karen didn't care, didn't know what she'd hacked apart. I'd waved off her nagging before, thought she was just a pest with a power trip. Now, this was war. She'd crossed a line, shredded something sacred, and that smirk burned into me like a brand. I stood, fists tight, staring at her house, Blue shutters, flamingo, all that fake perfection. She thought she'd won, thought I'd roll over. Nope. Grandma taught me to stand tall, even when the roots get cut. I'd fight back, not with yells or fists, but something sharper, something she'd never see coming. This wasn't over, it was just starting. The backyard looked like a battlefield that Friday afternoon. 3 stumps where the oaks used to tower, sawdust scattered like ashes, the air still thick with the smell of cut wood. I couldn't stop staring, pacing barefoot over the torn-up grass, each step a stab in the gut. Those trees weren't just plants. They were Grandma's hands in the dirt, her voice in the wind, her promise to me when I was a kid scared of storms. I could still see her out there, bent over with a shovel, her gray hair tucked under a straw hat. "Oaks stand strong," she'd said, patting the soil around a sapling, her fingers rough but gentle. "They're us, kiddo, roots deep, heads high." I was 6, maybe 7, holding the watering can, grinning as she named them. Faith, hope, and grace. Now they were gone, hacked down by Karen's chainsaws, and I felt like I'd lost her all over again. I sank onto the porch steps, elbows on my knees, replaying it. Karen's smirk, her fake HOA rule. The crew's shrugs as they shredded my world. She'd strolled back inside after, coffee mugs swinging like a trophy, while I stood there, helpless, watching the last branch fall. The neighbors had peeked out, Mrs. Lee from 2 doors down, Pete across the street, but no one stopped her. They knew her too well. Karen wasn't just a nag. She was a storm in a floral skirt, tearing through the street with her clipboard and her rules. I'd laughed her off before, waved away her notes about leaf litter or view obstruction. Big mistake. She didn't warn this time. She struck, and now Grandma's pillars were stumps. I wasn't the only one she'd hit. Later that day, I wandered over to Mrs. Lee's, still shaky, needing air. She was out front, pruning her roses, her tiny frame hunched under a sun hat. "Saw what she did," she said, snipping a thorn, voice soft but sharp. "Those trees were beautiful, your grand's pride." Karen's got no shame. I nodded, throat tight. "She's done it to you too?" Mrs. Lee snorted, rare for her. "Find my birdhouse last year. Too bright," she said. "Paid $50 to keep her quiet." She pointed her shears down the street. "Pete got it worse. His fence offended the aesthetic. She's a bully with a title." I glanced at Pete's place. His chain-link fence still stood, rusty but defiant. Karen's reign wasn't new. I'd just been blind to it till it hit me. Back home, I dug out the HOA handbook from a kitchen drawer, dusty, dog-eared, Grandma's scribbles in the margins. Flipped to Article 7, Section 3, Obstructions to Aesthetic Harmony, and read it twice. Nothing about trees, views, or leaves. Just vague junk about maintaining standards. No specifics Karen could twist into chop 'em down. She'd lied, bluffed her way through with that clipboard and her smug grin. I grabbed my phone, typed a grievance, short, furious. "Karen Mitchell destroyed my trees. No rule cited, no notice given. Demand investigation." Printed it, marched to the HOA mailbox down the block, and stuffed it in, heart pounding. This wasn't over. She'd pay for this, somehow. Saturday, I checked the mail, hoping for a response, dreading a fine. Nothing yet, but Pete caught me on the way back, leaning on his truck, grease on his hands. "Heard you filed on her," he said, grinning crooked. "Good luck. Boards her fan club. She bragged at the last meeting, fixed my view," she said, like it's a damn medal. I kicked a pebble, fists tight. She lied. There's no rule. Just butchered him 'cause she could. Pete nodded, wiping his brow. "She's untouchable, till someone hits back." "You fighting?" His eyes glinted, like he'd join if I swung. "Yeah," I said, voice hard. "For Grandma." He clapped my shoulder. "Attaboy." Inside, I slumped at the kitchen table, handbook open, staring at the stumps through the window. Grandma's voice echoed, roots deep, heads high, and I clenched my jaw. Karen didn't just cut trees. She cut me, cut everything that made this house home. I'd ignored her petty jabs too long. Leaf notes, glares from her porch, that flamingo staring like her little spy. Now it was personal. She thought she'd won, thought I'd shrug and plant shrubs like a good little neighbor. Nope. Those oaks were my roots, and she'd ripped them out. I wasn't yelling or suing, not yet. I needed something bigger, something she'd feel in her gut like I did. I grabbed a soda, paced the yard, touching each stump. Faith, hope, grace, letting the rage simmer into a plan. Karen's house loomed next door, blue shutters, perfect lawn, a castle for her tyranny. She'd wave that clipboard like a scepter, thinking no one could touch her. But Grandma taught me strength wasn't loud. It was steady, quiet, growing till it broke through. I'd hit back, smart, not wild, use her own game against her. The HOA wouldn't care. Pete was right. They were her puppets. But there'd be a way, some crack in her armor. I'd find it, widen it, make her regret every saw she'd swung. For Grandma, for the Oaks, for me. This was war, and I'd plant my flag where it hurt her most. Saturday night. I couldn't sleep. The stumps out back stared at me through the window, shadows of Grandma's oaks mocking me in the dark. Karen's smirk kept replaying, coffee mug swinging, clipboard waving, like she'd won some grand prize by hacking my world apart. I wasn't letting it slide. She'd lied about that HOA rule, and I'd prove it. Catch her slipping, build a case, make her squirm. Sunday morning, I grabbed a cheap security camera from the garage, left over from when Grandma thought raccoons were stealing her tomatoes, and rigged it up. Mounted it on the porch, angled at the ruined yard, its little red light blinking like a promise. If Karen stepped one toe over the line again, I'd have her on tape. Cold, hard proof she couldn't bluff away. It didn't take long. Monday afternoon, I was inside, flipping through the HOA handbook again, still no rule about trees, when my phone buzzed. The camera app lit up, motion detected. I tapped the feed, heart kicking, and there she was, Karen, sneaking across the property line in her floral skirt, a spray bottle in hand. She crouched by my grass, right where the stumps sat, and started squirting, a misty cloud of something nasty drifting over the dirt. I bolted to the window, watching live as she doused the patchy lawn, muttering loud enough for the mic to catch. Weeds, ruining my view again. She smirked, same as Friday, then scurried back to her porch like a rat with a prize. I saved the clip, grinning, gotcha, you monster. I needed more than one video, though, something to tie her to the trees, not just her petty weed killer stunt. Tuesday, I hit the street, knocking on doors, phone in hand. First stop, Mrs. Lee, still pruning her roses, shears snipping like tiny guillotines. Hey, Mrs. Lee, I said, leaning on her fence. You see anything Friday, the tree crew? She paused, wiping sweat with a gloved hand. Saw him pull up, 8 sharp. Karen waved him in, pointed at your yard like she owned it. I yelled, what's this? But she said, HOA business, and shut me down. Her eyes narrowed. Should have called you, sorry kid. I shook my head. Not your fault. She's a bulldozer. Mrs. Lee nodded, snipping again. She's trouble, always has been. You fighting? I grinned. Damn right, for Grandma. Next was Pete, tinkering with his truck, radio humming low. Pete, I called, dodging a wrench on the ground. Friday, hear anything about the trees? He poked his head out, grease streaking his cheek. Heard her gloating Saturday, corner store, loud as hell. Finally fixed my view, she said, laughing like a hyena. Saw the crew too. Chainsaws revving before you ran out. He spat in the dirt. She's a piece of work. Find my fence for rust. You got her number. I showed him the weed killer clip, his grin widening. That's gold, kid. Nail her. I nodded, pocketing the phone, shaky proof, but it was stacking. Mrs. Lee's eyes, Pete's ears, Karen's own spray bottle. Wednesday, I mailed a second grievance, attached stills from the video, timestamps circled, Mrs. Lee and Pete's accounts typed up neat. Karen Mitchell trespassed, poisoned my lawn, destroyed my trees. No rule cited. Act now. Dropped it in the HOA box, chest tight with hope. Thursday, the reply came. A thin letter, stamped official, but the words were a slap. Complaint reviewed. No violation found. Ms. Mitchell acted within HOA discretion. Case closed. I crumpled it, tossing it on the table. Discretion? She'd butchered Grandma's oaks, sprayed my grass with who knows what, and they shrugged? Pete was right. Her fan club ran the show. Karen's house loomed out the window, shutters smug, flamingo staring, and I fumed. She was untouchable, or so she thought. I wasn't done. That night, I posted the weed killer clip online. Neighborhood Facebook group. No hesitation. Caption. Karen's at it again, spraying my yard after cutting my trees. HOA says it's discretion. You tell me. Hit send, watched it blow up. 50 likes in an hour, comments raging. Mrs. Lee's daughter. She find mom's birdhouse. Now this. Phil down the street. Yelled at my kid's lemonade stand, psycho. Pete. Check her shed. Probably got more poison. Shares spiked. 100, 200. Neighbors I'd never met piling on. She nagged my mailbox. Find my dog. The HOA page stayed silent, but Karen's shield was cracking. People saw her now, not just me. Friday, I stood by the stumps, running a hand over Faith's rough edge. Rings counting Grandma's years, her strength carved deep. The anger was still there, hot and sharp, but something else grew. Resolve, steady as those roots used to be. Karen thought she'd won, thought her clipboard and her cronies could bury me. She didn't get it. Those trees were Grandma's soul, and I'd fight till my knuckles bled to make her pay. The clip was a start. Neighbors were waking up, whispering her name with disgust. I had proof, shaky but real. Mrs. Lee's witness, Pete's story, Karen's own hands on that bottle. The HOA dodged, but I'd dig deeper, hit harder. I'd find her weak spot, something she couldn't bluff away, and twist it till she broke. For Faith, hope, and grace. For Grandma. For me. Friday night, I was still fuming over the HOA's discretion dodge. Karen's weed killer clip buzzing online, neighbors raging, but her cronies shielding her like always. I paced the kitchen, the crumpled letter glaring from the table, stumps haunting me out the window. She'd cut Grandma's oaks, poisoned my grass, and strutted away untouchable, or so she thought. I needed a bigger swing, something to hit her where it hurt, not just nibble at her edges. Saturday morning, I was out front, raking sawdust from the massacre, when Pete rolled up in his truck, radio off for once, a grin splitting his greasy face. Got dirt, he said, leaning out the window. Karen's sinking, houses in foreclosure. I dropped the rake, heart kicking. What? Her place. Pete nodded, hopping out, boots crunching gravel. Heard it at the gas station. Bank's got it. Dues unpaid for months. She's broke, hiding it behind that clipboard. He jerked a thumb at her house, blue shutters, flamingo smug as ever. Been dodging bills, playing queen while the repo man circles. I stared, brain spinning. Foreclosure? Karen, the HOA tyrant, losing her castle? It was too good, too perfect. She know? I asked. Pete shrugged. Not yet. Bank's quiet till the hammer drops. Thought you'd want to hear. He clapped my shoulder, grinning wider. Your move, kid. I bolted inside, rake forgotten, and grabbed my laptop. Fingers flying, searching county records. There it was, buried in legal junk. Mitchell property, 142, Oak Lane. Notice of default, auction pending. 6 months behind. Thousands owed, a ticking clock. My pulse raced. Her perfect little kingdom was crumbling, and she didn't even know. I leaned back, staring at her house through the blinds, shutters shut tight, like she could hide the truth. Then it hit me, a plan, wild and sharp, cutting through the haze of rage. What if I bought it? Took her turf, turned her weapon into mine? Grandma's voice whispered, roots deep, heads high, and I grinned, slow and fierce. This was it. I'd saved up. Grandma's estate left me a chunk, enough to keep the house afloat while I figured out life. Never thought I'd spend it like this, but the numbers checked out. Her place was cheap, bank desperate, market slow, and I had just enough to snatch it. I called my buddy Sam. He'd flipped a house once, knew the game. Foreclosure auction, I said, voice tight. Karen's place, can we bid quiet? He laughed, low and thrilled. Proxy bid. Bank won't care who, long as the cash clears. You serious? I glanced at the stumps. Faith, hope, grace, feeling their weight. Dead serious. For Grandma. He whistled. Give me 2 days, I'll set it up. She's gonna flip. Sunday. I kept it low, raked the yard, waved at Mrs. Lee, acted like nothing was brewing. Karen strutted out once, spraying her roses, glaring at my camera like she dared it to blink. Clueless, perfect. Sam worked fast. Monday, he called, bids in, under my name. Auctions tomorrow. Bank's itching to unload. You're gold if it sticks. I paced, nerves buzzing, picturing it. Her porch, her shutters, her flamingo mine. Not to live in. Hell no. But to own, to control, to twist the knife she'd stabbed me with. Grandma's money wasn't just cash. It was her fight, her roots, and I'd plant them right in Karen's gut. Tuesday hit like a thunderclap. Sam texted at noon. It's yours. Bank took the bid. Deeds processing. Congrats, landlord. I hooped, fist pumping, alone in the kitchen, the sweetest rush since this mess started. I owned her house, her castle, her throne, and she didn't know. I grabbed a soda, chugged it, staring at her place through the window. She was out front, clipping her hedges, skirt swishing like she still ruled the street. Smug, oblivious, about to crash. I'd serve her eviction, kick her out, take her down. But first, I let it sink in. This wasn't just revenge, it was justice, Grandma's strength rising from those stumps. I dreamed that night, wild, vivid stuff. Grandma in her hat, planting new oaks where Karen's porch stood, laughing as the roots cracked her perfect concrete. I woke Wednesday, grinning, and called Sam. Next step, eviction. How fast? He chuckled. Sheriff's notice, 48 hours once the deed's filed. Got a deputy pal. Owes me a favor. She'll scream. Hope you're ready. I was, more than ready. I'd stood by those stumps too long, felt the hole she'd carved in me. Now I'd fill it, with her panic, her fall, her flamingo in the dirt. Online, the weed killer clip still simmered. Neighbors griping. Check her shed. Buzzing in the group. I didn't post yet. Kept the buy quiet. A bomb ticking under her nose. Pete caught me later, raking again, and I spilled it low. Bought her house, foreclosure. She's out soon. His jaw dropped. Then he laughed, loud, barking. You're a genius, kid. She'll lose it. Wish I'd seen her face when the oaks fell, but this? Goal. I grinned, leaning on the rake. For Grandma. New trees, her way. He nodded, eyes glinting. Plant 'em tall. I stood by the stumps that evening, hand on Hope's rough edge, feeling Grandma's quiet fire. Karen thought she'd buried me. Thought her HOA shield and her smirk could crush anything. Wrong. I had her house now, her turf, her rules, flipped upside down. She'd cut my roots. I'd rip out hers. The deed was mine, the eviction brewing, and soon she'd know. Feel that gut punch like I had. This wasn't just a win. It was a promise kept, a legacy reborn. I'd plant new oaks, watch them grow, and laugh when she screamed. Game on. Karen, your castle's mine. Wednesday night. I could barely sleep. Owning Karen's house was a live wire in my chest, crackling with every thought of her smug face crumbling. The deed was mine, locked in through Sam's proxy bid, and the bank had signed off fast, too fast for her to sniff it out. Thursday morning, I called Sam, voice low, buzzing. Eviction, how's it roll? He laughed, sharp and thrilled. Deputy Mike's on it. Owes me from a poker night. Notice is ready. He'll serve it today, midday, her porch. You want a front row seat? I grinned, glancing at her house, shutters tight, flamingo glaring. Hell yeah for Grandma. Sam chuckled. Brace yourself. She'll blow like a volcano. I kept it cool all morning. Raked the yard again. Waved at Pete. Acted like nothing was up. Karen strutted out once, watering her roses, clipboard tucked under her arm like a shield. She glared at my stumps, then my camera, still blinking from the porch, muttering something about messy yards. Clueless as ever, sipping coffee like she still owned the street. My phone buzzed at noon. Sam, Mike's en route, 5 minutes. I bolted to the window, heart slamming, blinds cracked just enough to watch. This was it. Her crown yanked off, her castle stormed, all with a single piece of paper. The squad car rolled up quiet. No sirens, just a slow crunch of tires on gravel. Deputy Mike stepped out, tall, broad, badge glinting under the sun, eviction notice in hand, a folded white dagger. He strode to her door, boots steady, and I held my breath. Karen answered fast, skirt swishing, coffee mug mid-sip, squinting at him like he'd interrupted her royal nap. Karen Mitchell? Mike said, voice flat. She nodded, wary. You're served, eviction notice. New owners taking possession. 30 days to vacate. He handed it over. She snatched it, eyes darting over the words, then froze. Her mug slipped, shattering on the porch, coffee splattering her sandals, and she screamed, a high, wild shriek that echoed down the street. This is my house. I stepped outside, casual, phone filming from my porch. Couldn't resist. Mike stayed stone-faced, tipping his hat. Not anymore, bank sold it. Questions, call the county. Karen's face went red, then purple, veins popping as she waved the notice like a flag. This is a mistake. I'm HOA. Nobody can touch me. She spotted me, eyes blazing, and jabbed a finger. You did this, thief. I grinned, leaning on the railing. Bought it fair, foreclosure, Karen. Should have paid your dues. She screeched again, stomping toward me, but Mike stepped in, hand up. Ma'am, back off, legal's legal. She froze, trembling, then spun back to her door, slamming it shut, glass rattling. The street lit up, neighbors pouring out like ants to sugar. Pete ran over, shirt half tucked, laughing so hard he wheezed. Holy hell, kid, you evicted her? Genius. Mrs. Lee shuffled up, clapping slow, roses forgotten. She cut your trees. Now this? Good riddance. Phil jogged from down the block, kid trailing with a lemonade cup. Saw her scream. Best day since she find my stand. I grinned. Filming still, Karen's porch a crime scene, coffee pooling, notice crumpled on the steps. Online went nuts, posted the clip. Tree killer served, eviction day. Likes exploded, 210 minutes. Comments roaring, karma's real. Plant new trees. Pete yelled, check her shed. Same old chant, louder now. Karen wasn't done. She cracked her door an hour later, clipboard out, yelling at nobody. This is harassment. HOA won't stand for it. I laughed, loud enough she heard, and called Sam. She's melting, thinks the HOA'll save her. He snorted. Boards are puppets, but they can't undo a sale, deeds ironclad. I hung up, plotting, she'd fight, claw back. Friday, an HOA letter hit my box, her handwriting, sharp and furious. Resident at 142, Oak Lane cited for harassment via property purchase. Fine, $300. I laughed again, desperate dumb. Grabbed my phone. Posted it with the tree pics and weed killer clip. She cuts my trees. I buy her house. She finds me? Judge this. Shares spiked. 500, 1,000. Neighbors raging. She's insane. Booed her out. Saturday, I stood by the stumps. Faith, hope, grace. Running a hand over their rough edges. Feeling Grandma's quiet strength. Karen's scream still rang in my ears. Shrill, broken. The sound of her world cracking. She'd cut my roots. Thought she'd won. But I'd flipped it. Bought her house. Served her out. Turned her throne to ash. The neighborhood was with me. Pete's laugh. Mrs. Lee's clap. Phil's cheer. A chorus she couldn't silence. Online, the clip hit 50K views. Eviction queen. Trending local. I grinned. Touching Hope's rings. Grandma's years. Her fight in me. This wasn't just revenge. It was justice. Her legacy rising from the dirt. Karen's fine was a joke. HOA couldn't touch me now. I owned her turf. And soon, I'd own her tears. Next step, her castle falls. Karen's eviction notice hit her like a brick through a window, and the 30-day clock was ticking fast. Her scream from Thursday still echoed. Coffee mug shattered, neighbors cheering, and my clip of it was viral gold, racking 100K views by Sunday. She didn't slink away quiet, though, spent the next week stomping around, yelling at her roses, glaring at my camera like it'd flinch. The HOA's $300 harassment fine sat on my table, a laughable last swing, but online shut it down. Thousands calling her out, tree killers desperate, trending. I owned her house now, deed locked, her castle mine, and she knew it. Move-out day loomed, and I was ready for the fireworks. It came fast. 2 weeks later, mid-October, a crisp Tuesday morning. A beat-up moving truck rolled up at 8, 2 guys in faded tees hopping out, scratching heads at her blue-shuttered mess. I grabbed my phone, set it on the porch, filming, always filming, and leaned back, soda in hand. Karen burst out her door like a tornado, skirt flapping, arms waving, barking orders. Careful with that lamp. Don't scratch the table. The movers shrugged, hauling out her junk, floral couch, chipped dresser, a stack of clipboards like war trophies. Neighbors peeked. Pete on his lawn, Mrs. Lee by her roses, Phil's kid pedaling slow, watching her kingdom crumble. She didn't see me at first, too busy screeching at a mover dropping a vase. It smashed, shards scattering, and she spun, face red as her roses. You idiots. That's antique. Then her eyes locked on me, filming, grinning, and she lost it. You. She roared, storming across the line, fists clenched, leaving a mover holding a lamp midair. You stole my life, my house. This is your fault. I stood, casual, phone steady. Bought it fair, Karen. Bank says hi. You cut my trees. I took your turf. She screeched, louder than eviction day, lunging like she'd claw me. Pete bolted over, laughing. Whoa, lady, chill. She spun on him, spitting. Stay out, you slob. Your fence is next. The movers kept going. Her flamingo yanked from the lawn, tossed in the truck like a dead bird. She whirled back, spotting it, and shrieked again, not my flamingo. High and wild, cracking mid-note. I zoomed in, her ponytail unraveling, skirt streaked with dirt, a queen dethroned in real time. Smile, Karen. Internet's watching. I called, and she froze, eyes darting to my phone, then charged again. Mrs. Lee stepped up, tiny but fierce, waving her shears. Back off, he owns it now. You earned this. Karen glared, panting, but stopped. Outnumbered, outgunned, her porch a pile of boxes. She retreated, yelling at the movers instead. Faster, you slugs. As they hauled out a pressure washer, potted plants. A tacky mirror she'd hung to class up the place. Pete leaned on my railing, grinning. She's a train wreck. Best show since the trees fell. I nodded, filming her stumble over a hose, cursing loud enough to scare Phil's kid off his bike. The truck filled, her life in cardboard, stacked sloppy, and she stood by it, hands shaking, glaring at me. This isn't over, she hissed, voice low now, venom dripping. You'll pay. HOA'll bury you. I laughed, loud and sharp. Got the deed. Karen, your rules don't stick. Bye-bye. She climbed into her SUV, movers peeling out, truck groaning, and gunned it, tires squealing as she vanished down the street. Silence hit, sweet, heavy, then Pete clapped, slow and loud. Ding-dong, which is gone. Mrs. Lee smiled, shears down, and Phil's kid pedaled back, yelling, she's outta here. I stopped filming. 10 minutes of pure chaos, her meltdown caught live, and posted it. Tree killer moves out. Meltdown special. Likes flooded. 50K views in an hour. Comments roaring. Flamingo down. Plant those trees. The neighborhood exhaled. Her shadow lifted. Her shutters mined to crack. Pete hung back, kicking gravel. You're a legend, kid. She's toast. What's next? I grinned, glancing at her empty porch. Demo, then New Oaks. Grandma's way. He nodded, pulling a beer from his pocket. I'll bring the grill, celebration when it falls. Mrs. Lee shuffled over, holding a packet, tree seeds, tiny and brown. For your gran, plant 'em strong. I took 'em, throat tight, feeling her quiet cheer. Thanks, means a lot. Phil waved from his yard, kids slurping lemonade. No more fines, party at Pete's. The street was alive, laughs, plans, a buzz Karen couldn't touch. Inside, I dug through the shed, found Grandma's old gardening gloves, worn and soft, tucked in a box with her trowel. Held 'em close, smelling dirt and her, lavender, always lavender. Karen's meltdown replayed on my phone, her shrieks, her stumble, her flamingo in the dust, and I laughed, softer now. She'd cut my trees, thought she'd won, but I'd flipped it, evicted her, owned her world, turned her reign to rubble. The neighborhood stood with me. Pete's grill, Mrs. Lee's seeds, Phil's cheer, a family she'd never break. I slipped on the gloves, flexing my hands, Grandma's strength, mine now. Her house was empty, her power gone, and soon it'd fall. For faith, hope, grace. I'd won this round, and she'd screamed her way out. Karen's move-out meltdown was the neighborhood's new favorite rerun. Her clip hit 200K views by the next week. Her flamingo toss memed into oblivion. Her house sat empty. Mine now, blue shutters dusty, porch bare, a hollow shell begging for the wrecking ball. I didn't wait, called a demo crew Thursday, set it for Saturday. Full tear down. I told him, grinning over the phone. Leave the lot clean, new start. They booked it fast, cheap job, quick cash, and I buzzed, picturing it. Her castle smashed, her rain dust, Grandma's oaks rising from the rubble. Pete caught wind Friday, banging on my door with a grin. Demo day? I'm grilling, party's on. I laughed. Bring the tunes, biggest bash yet. Saturday dawned loud. Crew rolling in at 7. A hulking yellow excavator rumbling like a beast. I I stood on my porch, phone filming, coffee in hand, Grandma's old mug, chipped but hers. Neighbors trickled out, Pete hauling his grill, Mrs. Lee with a folding chair, Phil's kid clutching lemonade to sell. The operator, a burly guy named Tony, hopped down, shaking my hand. Yours to trash. Where's it start? I pointed at her porch, Karen's smug perch, where she'd smirked over my stumps. There, make it loud. He grinned, climbing back in, and the machine roared, claw raised, ready to bite. First hit was gold. Metal teeth smashed her steps, concrete cracking like thunder, dust billowing thick. The crowd hooped, Pete yelling, "Take that, witch," as the claw swung again, ripping her doorframe clean off. Shingles flew, shutters snapped, her perfect, walls folding like paper. I zoomed in, wood splintering, glass shattering, a symphony of ruin. Mrs. Lee clapped, slow and fierce, muttering, "For your gran." Phil's kid danced, lemonade sloshing, hollering, "No more mean lady." I grinned, heart pounding. Karen's kingdom was ash, and it felt damn good. Posted live, Tree Killer's castle gone. Views ticking up, 10K in minutes. Then she showed, mid-crash, as the excavator tore her roof. An SUV screeched around the corner, Karen's, dented and loud, braking hard by the curb. She leaped out, skirt crooked, sunglasses slipping, screaming over the rumble, "Stop! That's my house." Her voice cracked, wild and shrill, arms flailing like a busted windmill. Tony paused, claw midair, glancing at me. I waved him on, "Keep going, my deed," and he shrugged, slamming into her chimney next, bricks raining. Karen charged the fence, fists banging, dust coating her hair. "You monster! You thief! I'll sue, destroy you." I filmed, cool as ice. "Bought it, trashed it, your trees started this." Scream louder, internet's live. She did, lungs bursting, a banshee in a cloud of rubble. "This is my life, you can't do this." Pete cranked his radio, rock blaring, drowning her, and tossed me a burger, laughing. "She's toast. Eat up, hero." Mrs. Lee stood, tiny but steely, yelling, "You cut his trees. Now this." Karen spun on her, then me, face purple, spitting dust. "HOA'll bury you. Mark my words." I laughed, loud and sharp. "HOA's done. Your puppets ran. Wave bye-bye." The claw hit her kitchen, tiles exploding, sink twisting, and she staggered back, hands in her hair, a broken queen in the dirt. The crew didn't stop. 2 hours, her house was gone, a flat stretch of churned earth where her tyranny stood. Karen peeled out, tires squealing, her scream fading down the street, neighbors cheering like it was a touchdown. Pete blasted horns through his speakers. Phil's kid sold out his lemonade, tossing cups in the air. I stopped filming. 20 minutes of chaos, her drive-by meltdown pure gold, and posted. Demo day. Karen screams at rubble. Views spiked. 50K, 100K, comments roaring. Flamingos next. Plant those trees. The HOA posted too. Week, late. No violations noted. Private property action. Spineless. They'd lost her, lost control. Dust settled. The lot gleamed empty under the sun. I grabbed a sapling from Mrs. Lee's seeds, tiny, green, trembling, and planted it where Karen's steps had been, Grandma's gloves on my hands. Pete watched, beer down. For her. I nodded, patting soil. "Faith, first of 3. She'd love this." He grinned, firing the grill, burgers sizzling, smoke curling. Mrs. Lee brought more seeds. Phil's kid ran circles. Neighbors laughed. Street alive, free mine. Online hit 5 million. Karen's castle crash, trending. Clips looping her scream. My sapling, a victory dance in dust. I stood by Faith's sprout, gloves off, feeling Grandma's quiet smile, her strength in every root I'd plant. Karen's meltdown was her crown shattering. Her house gone, her power smashed, her voice just noise now. She'd cut my trees, thought she'd won, but I'd flipped it, evicted her, raised her world, turned her reign to dirt. The neighborhood stood with me. Pete's grill, Mrs. Lee's seeds, Phil's cheer, a family she'd never break. Her scream was my trophy, her rubble my canvas. Next came hope, grace, oaks rising where she fell. This was justice, loud, messy, Grandma's, and I'd savor every crack. Karen's Demolition Day meltdown was the street's new anthem, her scream looping online, hitting 6 million views by Monday, dubbed Rubble Rage, with cartoon sound effects. Her house was gone. My lot now, a blank slate of dirt with Faith's sapling poking up where her porch once smirked. I figured she'd slink off, lick her wounds somewhere far from here. Nope. Tuesday morning, I was watering Faith, Grandma's gloves on, dirt under my nails, when a beat-up sedan rolled up, a skinny guy in a cheap suit stepping out. He handed me a thick envelope, voice flat. "You're served, court summons." I tore it open, Karen's name in bold, suing me for emotional distress and property damage, demanding $15,000 and her house rebuilt. I laughed, loud, sharp, watching him scurry off. Her last gasp, and it was pathetic. Inside, I spread the papers on the kitchen table, legal gibberish, signed by some hack lawyer, Harold Klein, claiming the demo traumatized her and I'd stolen her life. She wanted cash, a new house, my soul, whatever she could claw back. I grabbed my phone, called Sam. He'd handled the foreclosure bid, knew the ropes. "She's suing. Distress, damages, whole circus," I said, pacing. He snorted. "After cutting your trees? She's got guts, zero brains. Klein's an HOA stooge, cheap, sloppy. You've got this. Evidence is king." I grinned, glancing at Faith through the window. "For Grandma, let's bury her." I didn't waste time, dug into the war chest, pulled every clip, tree-cutting pics from Friday's chaos, the weed killer spray, eviction serve, demo day meltdown, all time-stamped, saved tight. Stacked the foreclosure docs, bank sale, my deed, proving her house was mine, legal and clean. Printed Pete's story, Karen gloating at the store, and Mrs. Lee's witness note. Saw her order the crew, 8 a.m. Added Phil's rant, her finding his kid's lemonade stand, showing her reign of petty terror. The HOA handbook sat open, no tree rule, just her bluff, and their discretion, Dodge crumbled next to my proof. I'd bury her in facts. She'd swing, miss, fall hard. Wednesday, I hit the street, needed the crew locked in. Pete was first, tinkering under his truck, radio humming. "She's suing. Court next week," I said, leaning on his fence. "You in?" He poked out, grinning. "Hell yeah, find my fence for rust. I'll tell the judge she's nuts, gloating about your trees like a trophy." I nodded, clapping his shoulder. Legend. Next, Mrs. Lee, pruning roses, shears steady. "Karen's at it, suing me. Testify." She snipped a thorn, eyes sharp. "Saw her wave that crew in. Cut your grand's trees cold." "I'm there." Phil caught me by his mailbox, kid slurping lemonade. She yelled at my boy, "Unpermitted stand." "I'll back you." Her tears don't wash. I grinned. Team locked, ready to roll. Online, I dropped a teaser. "Tree killer sues me. Court soon." With a demo still, Karen mid-scream, dust in her hair. Views spiked. 500K overnight. Comments raging. "She's shameless. Plant more trees." Pete texted. "Check her shed. Bet she's got more dirt." Still his battle cry. The neighborhood buzzed. Mrs. Lee's daughter shared her birdhouse find. Phil posted his kid's stand pic captioned, "Karen's victim." The HOA stayed quiet. Cowards, ducking her mess. But their silence screamed weakness. Karen strutted somewhere, thinking her suit would scare me. She didn't get it. I had the street, the clips, the truth. Thursday night, I stood by Faith's sapling, tiny, green, swaying in the breeze, Grandma's gloves tucked in my pocket. Touched its stem, feeling her strength, her roots in me. Karen's lawsuit was a desperate flail. Her house gone, her power dust. Now this? She'd cut my trees, thought she'd won, but I'd flipped it, evicted her, smashed her world, owned her turf. Her $15,000 cry was a joke, Klein flop, her lies crack. I pictured her in court, skirt swishing, fake tears, facing my stack. Clips, deeds, neighbors ready to spill. She'd swing wild. I'd hit steady, Grandma's way. Friday, Pete dropped by, beer in hand, grinning. "Court's gonna be a show. She'll scream. You'll win. Burgers after." I laughed. Deal victory grill. Mrs. Lee left a note. "More seeds. For hope. Grace. Plant 'em proud." Phil's kid ran up, lemonade cup out. "Beat her. She's mean." I took it, sipping, tart, sweet, a kid's cheer. Online hit 7 million. Karen's last stand, trending, fans begging for live updates. I prepped the clips, tree stumps, her spray, her rubble rage, ironclad, sharp as her shears. Karen thought she'd claw back, thought her HOA ghosts could haunt me. Wrong. I had Grandma's gloves, the neighborhood's fire, a sapling growing where she fell. Court was next, her gasp my win. I'd plant hope soon, watch her choke on it. Court day hit like a storm brewing. Monday, gray and tense, the neighborhood buzzing all week over Karen's lawsuit. I'd prepped hard. Clips, docs, neighbors locked in, my stack of Fortress against her $15,000 wine. Online was wild. 8 million views on Karen's last stand. Fans begging for the blow-by-blow. I rolled up to the courthouse downtown. Squat brick, flickering lights. Wearing Grandma's gloves in my pocket for luck. Phone off, but itching to post. Pete, Mrs. Lee, and Phil filed in behind me. My crew, ready to bury her. Karen strutted in late. Skirt swishing, blazer tight, fake tears prepped, with Klein, her cheap-suited hack, smirking like he'd won already. I grinned, bring it. Judge Carter, a gruff old guy with a buzz cut, banged his gavel, glasses low. Mitchell versus. You, let's move. Klein jumped up, all slime and swagger, waving papers. Your Honor, my clients suffered emotional distress, property loss, harassment. Defendant stole her home, demolished it, trauma's real. We seek $15,000 restitution. Karen dabbed her eyes, voice wobbling. He took everything. My house, my peace. Over some trees. The demo was cruel, illegal. She trotted out 2 HOA pals, shifty-eyed, claiming I'd bullied her with the buy. Klein sat, smug, thinking he'd nailed it. Pete snorted behind me. Mrs. Lee gripped her shears like a weapon. Carter squinted at me. Defendant. I stood, steady, sliding my stack forward. Clips printed, deeds crisp. Your Honor, Karen Mitchell cut my trees. 3 oaks, my grandma's legacy. No rule, no warning. Here's proof. Photos of the stumps, her weed killer trespass, foreclosure docs. Her house was bank-owned. I bought it legal. Eviction clip, demo day, she screamed, but it's mine to trash. Neighbors saw her order the cut. Pete heard her gloat. Mrs. Lee watched. Phil got fined too. She's the bully, suing's her last swing. I sat, heart thumping. Pete nodding. Mrs. Lee whispering, for your gran. Carter flipped through, stump picks, Karen's spray bottle, her rubble rage frozen mid-shriek. This her, he asked, pointing. I nodded. Yes, sir, caught red-handed. He turned to Klein. Explain. Klein stammered. Context. Distress. But Karen cut in, shrill. He tricked me, stole my life. Those trees were a menace. Leaves everywhere. Carter banged the gavel. Quiet. Facts, not whining. He scanned my deeds, chuckled. Short, dry. Foreclosure's clear. She lost it, you bought it. Demos you're right, private property. Trees? No rules cited. Her bad. He tossed Klein's papers back. Case dismissed. $2,000 fine on Mitchell for wrongful cutting. 10 minutes. Done. Karen's jaw dropped. Then she screamed, a banshee wail, lurching up. This is wrong. I'm HOA, you can't. Klein grabbed her arm, hissing, sit. But she shook him off, glaring at me. You'll pay, market. Carter banged again. Out, or it's contempt. She stormed off, skirt flapping, Klein scrambling after. Her tears fake, till the end. Pete clapped my back, laughing. Toast, total toast. Mrs. Lee smiled, shears down. Justice, your gran's proud. Phil grinned, kid's lemonade cup raised. No more fines. I exhaled, Karen's fall, my win, grandma's roots avenged. Tuesday, she was gone. Moving truck packed overnight. No wave, just a glare from her SUV as she peeled out. New folks rolled in by week's end. Jen and Mark, quiet, tree-loving, bringing cookies instead of clipboards. Heard the saga, Jen said, grinning. Love oaks, plant away. I laughed, shaking hands. Normal neighbors, no war. Online hit 10 million. Karen screams at rubble, crowned viral king. Fans dubbing me Tree Avenger. Posted the win. Court crushed her, saplings up. Faith thriving, hope planted by her old driveway. Grace next. Comments roared. Legend. Grow tall. Wednesday, I stood by the lot. 3 saplings now, tiny but fierce. Grandma's gloves on as I watered them. Pete fired his grill nearby, burgers sizzling, neighbors laughing, Mrs. Lee dropping seeds, Phil's kids selling lemonade free. The street breathed easy, Karen's shadow dust, her finest sting she'd choke on. Jen and Mark joined, Mark hauling a shovel. For your grand, Oaks suit this place. I nodded, throat tight. Community, roots, home reborn. Her house was rubble, her rain smashed, and I'd planted over it. Faith, hope, grace rising where she fell. Grandma's voice hummed in the breeze, soft, strong, her legacy whole again. I leaned on the shovel, watching hope sway. Karen's last gasp crushed, her screams just echoes now. She'd cut my trees, thought she'd won, but I'd flipped it, bought her house, raised it, beat her in court. The neighborhood stood with me. Pete's cheers, Mrs. Lee's faith, Phil's kids' grin, a family she couldn't break. Her $2,000 fine was my trophy, her exit my peace. I'd fought for Grandma, gloves on, roots deep, and won. The lot was mine, clean, green, hers no more. Sapling stretched, sky high, and I smiled. Heart full, home healed. Karen was gone. Her house dust, her screams a fading echo, her $2,000 fine a bitter pill she'd choke on somewhere far from here. The lot was mine now, flat, clean, with faith, hope, and grace poking up, tiny saplings stretching toward the sun where her porch once smirked. By November, the street felt new, lighter, like it had shaken off a bad dream. I woke Saturday to birds chirping, not chainsaws, and stepped outside, Grandma's gloves on, shovel in hand, to water the trio. Jen and Mark, the new folks, waved from their slice of her old turf, their kids' tricycle parked where her flamingo used to judge. No clipboards, no fines, just neighbors, real ones. The yard was healing fast. Faith stood tallest, 6 inches now, leaves bright. Hope and grace catching up, roots digging deep where Karen's concrete cracked. Pete rolled out his grill that afternoon, burgers sizzling, radio humming low, his tree party, promise kept. To the Oaks, he toasted, beer raised, shirt off as always. Mrs. Lee brought more seeds, acorns this time, smiling soft. For your gran, grow 'em big. Phil's kid ran up, lemonade free today, yelling, no mean lady. Jen and Mark joined, Mark hauling a sapling they'd bought, Jen laughing. Oaks fit here, Karen's loss. I grinned, planting it. For now, a little forest starting, dirt under my nails, Grandma's strength in every scoop. The street settled into something good. Mrs. Lee let her roses spill wild, thorny, free, no fines to clip 'em back. Phil's kids sold lemonade every weekend, jar stuffed with quarters, grinning like a champ. Pete's fence stood rusty and proud, Karen's rules dead, his tunes alive. Jen and Mark fit right in, no nagging, just cookies and nods when I revved the mower. Sunday, we sat on my porch, Pete, Mrs. Lee, Phil, the new crew, eating Jen's pie, watching the saplings sway. She'd hate this, Pete said, smirking, nodding at the lot. Peace, her nightmare. I laughed. Good, let her squirm. Online wouldn't let her go. Karen screams at rubble, hit 12 million. TikTok looping her wail with goofy filters. Fans dubbed me Oak King. Reddit threads begged for more. Monday, my inbox pinged. Sarah, 2 towns over. Karen's here, nagging my bird feeder's mess. Help. I grinned, typing back. Clips, proof, stand tall. Karen Guide 101. Nail her. She replied fast. She's toast. Thanks, tree guy. I laughed. Her kind didn't die, just slunk off, whining elsewhere. Pictured her glaring at Sarah's feeder, oblivious to tree killer, fame trailing her like stink. She'd never learn. Fine by me. Tuesday, I started a blog. Suburban Roots. Nothing fancy, just the saga. Trees cut, house bought, Karen crushed. Posted the clips, stumps, spray, demo, court, blurred her face, kept it clean. Added a form. Your HOA horror stories, spill. It popped. Thousands of hits, tales flooding in. A guy in Texas. Neighbor stole my grill, caught on cam. A lady in Ohio. HOA banned my gnome. Find him back with glitter. Paired him with tips, cameras, bylaws, quiet wins, and readers called it the Karen Playbook. Sold tree justice shirts. Cheap, fun, green with an oak. Cash for more saplings. Pete saw, chuckled. You're a menace, good kind. Wednesday afternoon, I stood by the lot, 4 saplings now, swaying gentle, grandma's gloves in my pocket. Watched Jen chase her kid through a sprinkler. Water clean, no poison, Mark laughing, no war in sight. Leaned on the shovel, feeling it. Peace, real and deep, what I'd fought for. Not just trees, but this, a street alive, not cowering under her clipboard. Mrs. Lee pruned nearby, humming. Phil's kid pedaled past, waving. Karen's shadow was dirt, her rain smashed, her screams dust. I'd flipped it, bought her house, raised it, planted over it. For Grandma, for me, for them. I kept the camera up, blinking on the porch, app on, saplings locked tight. Karen was gone, but Sarah's email proved her type lingered, nagging, scheming, waiting to strike. I pictured her 2 towns over, clipboard out, blind to her viral grave. If she crept back, or some new tyrant rose, I'd be ready. Thursday, I watered Faith, Grandma's mug by my side, coffee steaming, and smiled as hope stretched, grace greened. Took him for a walk, figurative, sure, checking routes, feeling her voice, heads high. Pete waved, grill smoking. Jen nodded, kid giggling. The lot was ours, green, growing, hers no more. I sat on the porch, gloves off, watching dusk settle, sapling silhouettes, street quiet. It was wild. A grudge over trees had toppled a queen, freed a neighborhood, turned me into some oak king I never meant to be. Poetic, in a green, gritty way. Karen's fall was my peace. Her fine, her exit, her rubble my roots. I'd fought with clips, deeds, neighbors. Won with Grandma's strength, not noise. The oaks were back, small, fierce, mine, and home felt whole. For now, it was enough, but I'd keep the shovel sharp. Roots reborn, ready for anything. So, that's the whole crazy saga. How Karen cut my grandma's trees, and I bought her house, smashed it, and planted new roots over her rubble. If you stuck through the chainsaws, the screams, and her epic courtroom flop, huge thanks, you absolute legends. You're the real champs for riding this suburban roller coaster with me. Dig it? Smash that like button. Let me know you'd fight a Karen for some oaks too. Drop a comment. Your wildest neighbor stories, the nuttier the better. I'll read 'em all. Might shout out the best in the next vid. Could be you outsmarting a clipboard tyrant or dumping glitter on a lawn Nazi. Hit subscribe if you're in. Keeps you locked for more root-level revenge. Cause Karens never quit, and neither do I. Share this with your crew. Spread the tree justice vibes. Catch you next time. Stay green, keep your shovel close, and let's grow.